Before I start, I acknowledge the traditional owner of this land and pay my respect to elders past and present. This is a personal story. My visual journey actually started when I was very much fond of fashion and acting. I wanted to become a model and actor, which did not materialize. I was hoping to get my portfolio undertaken by a professional photographer, but I could not afford at that time. When September 11 attacks happened in the US, I was offered an opportunity to work with foreign journalists as an interpreter. It was there when I was first introduced to photojournalism or documentary photography. To me, the concept of visual journalism was limited to pictures of press conferences or other news-related photos. I was around 18 years old and was traveling to my ancestral country for the first time. I was utterly devastated with the condition of the country. It had become the theater of war. Famine and war had transformed the image I had so long envisioned, and I was in for a shock. I wanted to do something. I wanted to hear their stories and be an amplifier for their voices. I chose photography as medium for my expression. The money I earned from interpreting, I bought my first analog camera. Too many reports of killings and war in Afghanistan were being published, and in the midst of all this destruction and fighting, I really wanted to capture some positive images of the country and the beauty of its rugged landscape. I felt that the world needed to know the beauty of this land and its people. Soon after searching and exploring the positive image of Afghanistan, many other social issues unfolded which were directly or indirectly I was confused by the picture here. Which were directly or indirectly caused by the war in the country. Those issues compelled me to change my focus to more important social issues. In 2010, I received a grant from Open Society Institute to work on a story about child trafficking. I mainly focused on the issue of the dancing boys of Afghanistan. In this practice, children are used to dance in private parties and gatherings for warlords and powerful men. These boys are often abducted or bought from their poor parents. They were put to work as sex slaves and dance for warlords in their functions. Some of these boys are brought into this practice when they are as young as 8 years old. To have procured young and good-looking boys was a symbol of wealth and power status in some parts of the country. In the parties, boys would often adorn themselves by wearing makeup and donning girls' costume. They were then drugged with hashish and alcohol and were made to please their masters and their friends. When I started working on the project, I knew about the involved risks to some extent, but the real challenge at that time for me was to approach these boys and their masters to complete the story. I tried almost every network to help me reach any of these boys or their masters, but none were helpful, including the UN organizations, human rights organizations, and some people who had connections with those warlords. I researched around 8 months until I met a boy named Shukur, who helped me get into one of these parties, and so I was introduced to their lives. I came to learn about Shukur's life. He was kidnapped from Kabul when he was only 12 years old. He was taken to a northern city of Afghanistan. He was kept in the custody of a warlord for 5 years until he ran away one day. On his return to Kabul, he was not accepted by his family and relatives. He failed to resume a normal life, so he went back to the same business, but this time as a freelancer. Shukur made a living from dancing in the parties and by prostitution. In Afghanistan's constitution, this practice is deemed illegal, but it is very widespread phenomena, and often high-rank governmental officials are involved in the running and spreading of this practice. Therefore, this issue has received very little attention in the media. Journalists or activists who attempt to expose this kind of issue can be very vulnerable to the risks they may face. The photo essay received the attention of the Special Representative for Children and Armed Conflict under the United Nations Secretary General. During her visit to Kabul, I was invited to meet her in person and to share my experience with her. She later raised this issue with the former president of Afghanistan. The Washington Post managed to find me and got in contact with me. This story made the front page of the newspaper in April 2012. This placed additional pressure onto the government of Afghanistan to address the growing violation of child rights. This was both a blessing and a misfortune. Blessing that at last this illegal practice was exposed before the international community. However, it was concomitantly a misfortune because I subsequently received death threats for having the temerity to expose this abominable practice. I was compelled to leave Afghanistan and return to Quetta, Pakistan. Security situation in Quetta had changed dramatically. The Hazaras were being targeted on a daily basis by the fundamentalist group called Lashkar-e-Jangvi. Quetta was not a safe place and my family was worried about my safety. They did not want me to stay there because no one knew if they could come back after leaving home in the morning. While I was planning to leave the country, I continued photographing the stories of people affected by the targeted killings. The Hazaras did not receive the attention of local media for being targeted by terrorists in Pakistan until individuals from the community started publishing the pictures of dead bodies, injured people, and physical damages caused by the detonation of suicide jackets to the buildings. It was only then that the international media began taking notice of the issue, and later the local media also started giving coverage to the incidents. When I left Pakistan, I had little understanding of the challenges of the journey with people smugglers. I wanted to document this unseen voyage to Australia via the irregular channel, so I decided to take my cameras with me. I was quite lucky that the people smugglers were not of a menace to my pictorial activities. We had to reach a compromise. I had to respect their concerns for not exposing their identities. I was aware of the power of photographs, that if successful, this journey would shed light on the issue of people seeking asylum and the accompanying challenges that ensued. My journey began by traveling to Thailand by air, then by road and boat to Malaysia and into Indonesia, paying people smugglers all the way and spending a lot of time hiding, a lot of time living in fear of being caught. In Indonesia, I joined a group of 7 asylum seekers in Bogor, a town outside of Jakarta. All 8 of us shared a bedroom. Cisarua is the neighborhood of Bogor. It is where many asylum seekers gather. They would pass their days with the stories of people smugglers' successful and unsuccessful boat trips, missing friends, stories from detention centers, and of escaping from detention. While I waited to find a smuggler for the boat trip, I kept documenting the daily lives of these people and the story that I had become a part of. On my first week in Bogor, 3 of my roommates left for the perilous journey. They had invited me to join them and offered to arrange it with people smuggler. I declined their invitation because I did not want to make a rush decision 2 days later, we got the news that a distressed boat sank in the sea en route to Christmas Island. Soon we heard our 3 roommates, Jafar, Nawroz, and Shabir were among those on board. Only Jafar was rescued. Shabir and Nawroz were never seen again. It made me think, am I doing the right thing? But I concluded I really had no choice but to go on. A few weeks later, the call came from the people smuggler to alert us that our boat was ready for us to commence our sea journey. Taken in the night to a small motorboat, we were ferried out to the main vessel. We got lost almost immediately and spent an hour and a half searching before pulling up alongside an old fishing boat that was already overloaded. There were 93 of us. Everyone was below deck. No one was allowed up on top. We had all paid $6,000. The first night and day went smoothly, but by the second night the weather had turned. Waves tossed the boat around and the timbers groaned. People below deck were praying, crying, vomiting. We lost all hope. We thought this is the end. Water poured in faster than the pumps could take it out. We went above deck and turned our torches on and off, trying to attract the attention of passing boats. The captain told us the boat was not going to make it. We kept trying to get attention by waving our life jackets and whistling. Eventually we made it to a small island. The boat crashing onto the rocks, we scrambled off the boat and over submerged rocks. I slipped into the sea and destroyed my camera, but luckily the memory card survived. The island was thick forest. We moved into the jungle, splitting up into groups as we argued over what to do next. All of us were all scared and confused. How would we find our way in the jungle? How would we get out of this hell and not being caught by the police? After a night sleeping on the beach, we found a jetty and coconuts. We hailed a boat from a nearby resort and were then quickly handed over to the Indonesian water police. On the ferry back to Java, the police took our money and valuables, and we only got them back after loud protesting. At Sirang Detention Center, an immigration officer furtively strip-searched us, taking our mobiles, shoes, and my $300 cash that I had with me. In our room, we were 8 people. We watched the guards checking their movements, and at 4 a.m., as they sat down around a fire, we removed 2 glass slats from the window facing outside and slipped through, taking our pillows and bed sheets with us. My friend and I went first, and the others followed, climbing a tree next to an outer wall that was topped with shards of glass. We put our pillows on the shards of glass, wrapped our forearms with the bed sheet, and our forearms with the bed sheet, and climbed over the wall and jumped to the other side, bare feet. I had lost all my contacts. The only number I had was Aubrey Belford's from the Global Mail. He was the guy I met one day before I took the boat. He wanted to interview me, but I did not excuse, but I said, we will do it. I didn't tell him that I'm taking the boat, so I had his business card left, so I called him. It was at 5 a.m. I called him and asked if he could do me a favor. Could we come to his house for a few hours, and could he pay for our taxi? So we could, and he did. We spent the day in the Jakarta and headed back to Cisarua, back where we started before taking the boat trip. I decided to stay in Indonesia to process my case through UNHCR after my documentary was aired on SBS Dateline. Many of my friends came to know about my situation, and every one of them tried to help me with my situation. I was in touch with my mentor Tim Page and his partner Marian Harris regularly. They tried to help me in every way possible and did not allow me to take another boat to risk my life. I was afraid that I would end up in Indonesia for years doing nothing like other asylum seekers, but it happened to be a little bit different with me. They contacted an old journalist friend of Tim Page, John Macbeth. John knew IOM is an organization, international organization for migration. Chief of mission in Indonesia, Dennis Neal, and asked him if he could be of any help. After getting to know about my past experiences and current situation, Dennis Neal helped out to expedite my case through UNHCR, and I was resettled in Australia in May 2013. The story was published in various newspapers and were exhibited around the world. For the first time, people were able to visualize this treacherous journey of asylum seekers to safety. Never before had stories been visually told. The story helped people to relate in a more humane way when topics of asylum seekers by board surfaced the media. Yeah, thank you.